At exactly 5:45 a.m. on May 26, 2025, a Ukrainian Air Force pilot climbed into the cockpit of a MiG-29, a fighter jet that honestly had no business carrying the weapons mounted under its wings. Within minutes, this 40-year-old Soviet-era aircraft was going to attempt something its original designers never even imagined, using French precision-guided bombs to strike Russia's most feared security agency, all coordinated through American GPS satellites and Ukrainian software barely held together with zip ties and sheer hope. As he taxied to the runway, the pilot could feel the historical weight of what he was about to do. No one had ever dared attack an FSB facility throughout the entire war. The intelligence services were supposed to be untouchable, shielded by thick layers of security and an unspoken agreement that certain targets were off limits. But not anymore. This mission was insane, even by Ukrainian standards. He had to fly just above the treetops to avoid detection, then suddenly climb to 5,000 meters to release his weapons, a move that would light him up on every radar screen from the front lines to Moscow. He'd get maybe 20 seconds to drop the bombs and dive back into cover before Russian defenses kicked into action. At 5:58, he shoved the throttles forward. The two Klimov RD-33 engines roared to life, producing a combined 18,000 pounds of thrust. The MiG-29 surged down the runway, lifting off into the early morning light with its impossible load. This Frankenstein fighter, part French engineering, part American tech, and entirely Ukrainian resolve, was on its way to deliver a direct message to Putin's infamous security service. The FSB was about to find out what 3 years of Ukrainian ingenuity could really do. By 6:15, the MiG-29 was screaming across open farmland at just 50 meters above the ground. He was so low that the jet washed bent wheat fields and scattered birds in frantic clouds. It was an exhausting ride, demanding constant inputs on the controls to dodge power lines, cell towers, and the occasional farmhouse. But it was the only way to stay under the radar, literally. The Russian border zone was crawling with radar systems, and the pilot was flying right through their territory. The margins were razor thin. Russia's S-400 missile systems around Belgorod could detect and hit targets from 400 kilometers away if they could see them. But Earth's curvature was working in his favor. At just 50 meters up, those radars couldn't spot him beyond roughly 25 kilometers. As long as he stayed low, stayed fast, and didn't slip up, he'd remain invisible. But that was about to change. In just 3 minutes, he'd have to climb, abandoning his stealth and flying straight into the enemy's crosshairs using cobbled-together tech. The target coordinates glowed on his iPad. And yes, an actual iPad duct-taped to the control panel. The destination: the Federal Security Service headquarters in Glovo, Belgorod Oblast, just 5 miles from the Ukrainian border. This wasn't some random ammo dump. This was Putin's old agency, the successor to the KGB, responsible for countless covert attacks on Ukraine. The two AASM hammer bombs strapped to his wings were both a symbol of everything wrong and everything right about this mission. These French precision bombs were never meant to work with Soviet hardware. The MiG-29's 1980s avionics had no clue what GPS even was, let alone how to use satellite coordinates launched decades after the jet was built. But Ukrainian engineers came up with a fix, exactly the kind of battlefield brilliance that's defined their war effort. In makeshift workshops in Kyiv, they built custom pylons, rigged GPS antennas to mounting brackets, and ran power cables through panels never meant to be touched. French electronics were now being powered by Soviet wires. It was insane, but it worked. The AASM hammer is a marvel of French design, takes a basic dumb bomb and turns it into a guided precision weapon. Each one costs more than an average home and combines inertial guidance with satellite accuracy to hit a window-sized target from 70 kilometers out. A solid fuel rocket kicks in post-release, accelerating the bomb close to supersonic speed. But none of that matters if the aircraft can't talk to the bomb. That's where the iPad came in. It ran special software to translate modern targeting data into something the Soviet jet systems could understand. It was digital duct tape. And this was its biggest test yet. At 6:22, the pilot reached the release point and yanked the stick. The MiG-29 shot upward at a 45-degree angle, crushing him into his seat with G-forces. The altimeter spun like mad. 1,000 meters, 2,000, 3,000, 3,000. His radar warning system lit up with alerts as every Russian defense system west of Moscow suddenly noticed him. The S-400 battery southeast of Belgorod locked on with its 92 N6 radar, tracking his position, speed, and heading. Within seconds, would have firing solution. But the pilot had one thing going for him. Surprise. The Russians had less than 45 seconds to react. And their entire system was built to counter traditional attack profiles. They didn't expect anything this reckless, which is exactly why it might work. At 5,000 meters, the iPad confirmed it was time. The pilot's thumb hit the release. Two solid thuds echoed through the jet as the bombs dropped. Instantly, he rolled the jet over and dove hard, performing a modified Immelman maneuver that would have made any World War I ace proud. He traded altitude for speed, rushing back down to the cover of low-level flight. Behind him, the bombs were already on their way. Their rocket motors ignited in midair, sending them rocketing toward Global. The GPS units locked onto satellites while the onboard inertial systems tracked every tiny movement. The bombs were now flying themselves, adjusting course hundreds of times per second to stay laser-locked on their target. The maneuver he'd just pulled off, toss bombing, was a relic from the Cold War. It was designed so nuclear-armed jets could drop bombs without having to fly. Directly overhead, the physics were straightforward. Climb sharply, release the bomb upward, then peel away while gravity and momentum carried it to the target. Simple on paper, not so simple with modern air defenses hunting you down. The Russian response was fast but useless. Two 48 N6 interceptor missiles launched with a roar racing through the sky toward the MiG-29. But he was already skimming the treetops again, weaving back and forth as fast as he could. Those missiles, built to take down high-altitude targets, couldn't lock onto something flying this low. They zoomed overhead, detonating in empty air. In under 2 minutes, the bombs would reach their target. The FSB personnel in Glovo had no idea that destruction was streaking toward them. Guided by American satellites and technology they couldn't even detect. The two AASM hammers represented 30 years of weapons evolution packed into 250 kilograms. As they reached the top of their arc, about 8,000 meters up, their onboard computers were crunching numbers that would have required a room full of experts a few decades ago. Each bomb had 3 key components. Up front, the guidance system, a combo of military-grade GPS and ring laser gyros that could guide the weapon even if all satellites were jammed. The French, learning from the U.S. experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, made sure the AASM could keep going even in a GPS-denied environment. The inertial nav system alone could get it within 10 meters of target. But the middle section is what made it lethal. Unlike American JDAMs, which simply guide the bomb, the AASM had a solid fuel rocket motor that gave it speed, distance, and the punch needed to smash through hardened buildings. The rocket burned for just 15 seconds, but could push the bomb to Mach 0.8, fast enough to make last-minute interception nearly impossible. The tail held the control fins, adjusting their angle 50 times per second. This allowed the bomb to pull off complex maneuvers, circling around obstacles or diving in from above. In today's strike, they'd drive the bomb straight through the roof of the FSB's headquarters. At 6:27, the first bomb's radar proximity fuse locked onto the roof, approaching at 250 meters per second. The fuse made one final calculation, syncing impact timing to detonate inside the building, not outside. The second bomb followed 0.3 seconds later, aimed 20 meters away to maximize destruction. At the same time, 6:19, to be precise, Senior Lieutenant Smirnov was halfway through his morning tea when his S-400 radar picked up two fast-moving aircraft climbing rapidly just 40 kilometers out. The computer pegged them as MiG-29 as Smirnov had 45 seconds to stop disaster. On paper, the S-400 is the best air defense system in the world, able to track 300 targets, hit planes up to 400 kilometers away, and even knock down ballistic missiles. But the system has a weakness: time. It takes about 10 seconds from detection to engagement for low-flying surprise attacks. By the time the missiles were in the air, the bombs were already diving. At 6 hours, 26 minutes, and 45 seconds, two 48 M6 missiles launched at Mach 6, aimed at the incoming bombs. But the geometry was off. The bombs were diving almost vertically, giving off almost no radar signature. The odds of interception dropped to just 12%. The missiles passed within 200 meters, close, but not close enough. They exploded harmlessly in the sky. At 6:27, the first AASM smashed through the FSB roof. Its shaped charge blasted a stream of molten copper through steel beams and concrete floors. The delay fuse counted down to perfection. When it detonated, 87 kilograms of high explosives tore through the building like a wrecking ball. The blast wave hit at 8,000 meters per second, blowing out walls and turning office furniture into deadly shrapnel. Then came the second bomb. Just 0.3 seconds later, the building structure was already compromised. This second strike delivered the knockout blow. Floors collapsed into one another. Columns buckled. The building imploded in a brutal, physics-driven chain reaction. Floor after floor came crashing down. In just 5 seconds, a symbol of Russian state security was reduced to smoking ruins. This was control lost.